folks, this is Alan. How you guys doing? And welcome to another movie review. And today I'm going to be reviewing the sci-fi classic from 1960, The Time Machine, directed by George Pal and based upon the classic sci-fi novel by H.G. Wells. The movie stars Rod Taylor, Alan Young, Yvette Mimieux, and Sebastian Cabot. And the plot of The Time Machine, according to the internet here, is as follows. Scientist H. George Wells, get it? Scientist H. George Wells builds a time machine, and despite the warning from his friend David against tempting the laws of Providence, he decides to visit the future. Jumping ahead 14 years, he observes changes in women's fashion. Jumping ahead 40 years, he meets David's son amid a terrible war. And finally, he travels thousands of years ahead to discover a post-apocalyptic world inhabited by humanoid Eloi and the monstrous Morlocks that feed on them. And that is your plot of The Time Machine. Okay, The Time Machine, the classic 1960 sci-fi film based on the novel by H.G. Wells. And this review has been long overdue. I've been meaning to review The Time Machine for quite a few years, but recently I was given a very good reason to finally review The Time Machine. The very sad news that the eternally lovely, talented actress Yvette Mimieux, who played Weena in The Time Machine, has recently passed away at the age of 80. And so this movie review is in tribute to the very talented, eternally lovely Yvette Mimieux, which I have to admit, I had a very big crush on Yvette Mimieux when I was a kid. She was my main childhood crush, not only because of The Time Machine, but also because of the 1979 Walt Disney sci-fi film The Black Hole that she also featured in. She was a very lovely woman and a very talented actress, and it saddens me that very few people, it seems, know who she was. Certainly younger people don't seem to know who Yvette Mimieux was, although this may be because Yvette Mimieux retired from the film industry in 1992 to pursue other interests. So she was done as an actress for the last 30 years of her life, pursuing other pursuits like painting and selling real estate, among other things. But if you know The Time Machine and or if you know The Black Hole, then chances are you are familiar with Yvette Mimieux. And this review is dedicated to her. The Time Machine. I think that this is a great sci-fi movie. I won't say it's perfect. I have one criticism of the film, just one, but otherwise, I think it's an excellent sci-fi classic. It's just great fun, you know? It has a lot of great imagination behind it. And it's also worth noting that The Time Machine won a well-deserved Oscar for the visual effects, showing George, played by Rod Taylor, in his machine traveling through time. And they used the visual effects of 1960 to achieve this, basically by using animation and stop-motion photography to simulate George traveling through time in his machine, where we see, you know, the melting candle, the dials on the clock spinning around, the sun passing through the sky very quickly. There's a wonderful visual effect in the film involving a window shop dummy, which is across the street from where George lives, and he's looking out the window, and we get to see the various dresses that come on and come off this window shop dummy, or mannequin, in the window shop across the street from George. And it's wonderful visual effects. Again, these are visual effects from 1960, but they're very effective even to this very day, and they're a whole lot of fun as they show how George travels through time in his machine. And The Time Machine itself is a classic movie prop. I mean, there are many different versions of The Time Machine. There have, in fact, been two other film versions of The Time Machine. There was a TV movie that was done in 1978, and then there was another theatrical film that I believe starred Guy Pearce as the lead. Wasn't very good. I wasn't all that impressed with that film version of The Time Machine, but in every single version of The Time Machine itself has a different design. But The Time Machine from 1960, The Time Machine itself, it's the classic design. I mean, it has a wonderful, elegant late 19th century design to it, with brass and with a comfy, elegant chair, and the flashing dials, and the crystal lever that operates it, and of course that golden or brass spinning disc behind the machine that powers the machine. It's a really beautiful, absolutely beautiful machine. And it's the classic time machine. Accept no substitutes. The classic Time Machine from 1960 is the best Time Machine. Nice to see that it's now, I guess, in a museum somewhere, a Hollywood museum, and it's been refurbished and it looks gorgeous, just as gorgeous as it did in the 1960 film. Rod Taylor is the leading man in this film, playing George. Throughout the film, he's only referred to as George, although his full name is H. George Wells, named after, of course, the author H.G. Wells. And Rod Taylor, man, he was a fantastic leading man. You know, I mean, very handsome, great physical presence, a fine actor. I think he really was the perfect actor to play George in The Time Machine. And yeah, he's great. He's absolutely great as we come along on the adventure with him. And he's just a great leading man. You know, you just like him right away. Alan Young plays George's friend David. And you may also know Alan Young, of course, from the classic old comedy series Mr. Ed. A horse is a horse, of course, yeah. In fact, The Time Machine was 1 year before Alan Young began starring in Mr. Ed. And of course, Alan Young did a lot of other work, like he did work for Disney films and things like that. You know, he worked quite extensively. But just before he took part in the TV series Mr. Ed, he was in The Time Machine playing George's best friend, David. And it's a very charming performance from Alan Young. He was a very talented actor, and it's great to see him in this film. A very charming performance from Alan Young as David. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the eternally gorgeous Yvette Mimieux as Weena, who's one of the Eloi that George meets in the year 802,701. Yeah, George goes really far into the future in his time machine in this film. But he meets the Eloi, these young, very passive young people who wear just these very simple clothes, very simple togas, it seems. And they're very passive and they don't work. They just frolic and they swim and they eat the fruit that grows, but they don't do anything other than just dance and frolic and eat and swim. But anyway, Yvette Mimieux plays one of the Eloi named Weena. And like I said, Yvette Mimieux, wow, I mean, she was so gorgeous, you know, and I mean, she was just 18 when she starred in The Time Machine. In fact, this was her debut film, and she was a very talented actress. Let's not just focus on her physical beauty, but I mean, very talented actress. She did many films between 1960 and 1992, but as I say, I know Yvette Mimieux from both The Time Machine as Weena and also in the 1979 sci-fi film The Black Hole, where she played Dr. Kate McCrae. And she was my childhood crush. I admit it. I definitely had a big crush on Yvette Mimieux. You know, she's so innocent in The Time Machine. You know, she asks George many questions. You know, she seems very curious, but very affectionate, very loyal to George. And I really like the little romance that happens between George and Weena. And you just can't help but fall in love with Weena. You know, she's just so adorable. You know, what can I say? And God bless you, Yvette Mimieux. You are missed. Rest in peace, beautiful lady. The movie also stars Sebastian Cabot, a very classic veteran actor, and he's probably best known for the comedy series Family Affair, but this is one of his earlier films before Family Affair, the TV series, and he's quite appealing in his supporting role as one of George's friends who doesn't believe his story about the time machine. As I said, the visual effects are terrific, again, using the stop-motion animation and stop-motion photography whenever George steps into his time machine, and really beautiful stuff, very creative, very imaginative, and I'm very happy that the film won that well-deserved Oscar for the visual effects. The visual effects are quite wonderful here. I like the set designs when George goes way into the future. Again, this is the year 802,701 we're talking about, and the designs of the buildings, and it's quite lovely to see, you know, the gardens with the overgrown fruit. There's also a part where George goes into the future, about 40 years into the future, and there's a nuclear war about to start, and there's like a lava flow that comes, which is impressive. I also like the scene where Weena shows George a room that has these talking rings. It's like you take a ring and you spin it on a glass table and you hear a recording. And that's a very cool scene that has a very good look to it. I also like the underground sets of the underground caves where the Morlock live. The only criticism I have of the Time Machine, really, I think, are the Morlocks themselves. the baddies in this film. They look menacing, but they're really not all that menacing. I mean, they look like these ugly blue creatures with big teeth and glowing eyes, and they have long, white, Edgar Winter kind of hair. And, they growl and all of that, but all George has to do is punch them, and he knocks them flat. One of them even gets killed just by being punched. So the Morlock in the Time Machine, I mean, yes, they look menacing, but they really aren't all that menacing because they can be killed so easily or knocked out so easily just by being punched. So they're not that great a menace, actually. They're probably the only criticism that I have of the film, but otherwise, I think this is a great film. I also enjoyed the scenes where, where George meets David's son, also played by Alan Young, in the year 1917, I think it was. And that scene was very touching, I thought. George doesn't hang around 1917 for very long, but that was a great scene. The nuclear war that happens in 1966, that's very well done, again, with the lava flow visual effects. And then, of course, the main action with the Eloi and the Morlocks in the year 802,701. It's all great fun. The movie is less than 2 hours long, so it flies by pretty quickly. And I just think it's wonderfully imaginative. You got a great cast, great visual effects, a classic time machine contraption. It's the classic time machine, folks, except no substitutes. And it's great fun. I really like the Time Machine a whole lot. This was definitely a favorite sci-fi film of mine when I was a kid, and looking at it now as an adult, I still love it. The only thing that stops it from being a perfect film for me are the Morlocks, who I think are kind of silly, but other than the Morlocks, this is a great, wonderfully entertaining sci-fi classic. And on a scale of 1 to 4 stars, I will give The Time Machine from 1960 3.5 out of 4 stars. 3.5 out of 4 stars for The Time Machine, the 1960 version. And that's my review of The Time Machine from 1960. This is Alan. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to subscribe down below, and I'll be back next time with another movie review. See you then.